Hey everybody, this is Brian back again. It's finally gotten cold enough that I started to winterize my Musa Basjoo banana plants. Took a while this year. Usually by the end of November, these things are falling apart, and that's when I would typically do this. But it took until just the day of Christmas, actually. It started to get pretty cold, and here we are the day after Christmas, and we've got snow. This is the first time that I've had these plants where it actually snowed on the first day. It was cold enough to make all the leaves droop. So never actually seen them like this with snow on. It's kind of cool to see that. But let's go ahead and get into how you want to approach winterizing these things and get them wrapped up for the winter. Now, again, I always wait until it really needs to be done. I wait until it gets cold enough that the tops are not going to survive. And at that point, that's when I go in and start to do the trimming and wrap the ones that I want to keep for next year. So first thing I'm doing is I'm going through and I'm cutting down to the stem, trying to make it a smooth or as smooth as possible surface all the way up the plant. If you've got smaller plants or you've only got a few plants, scissors will work and you can get through it pretty quickly. If you've got larger plants or you've got a bunch of these to do, I would recommend some larger edge clipper type scissors that give you more cutting power and just more ability to cut through the larger pseudostems and some of the bigger leaves. Now, when you're doing this, if you've got a bunch of concentrated plants, just be careful about pulling what you're cutting. You don't want to pull too hard and break one of the pseudostems of one of the plants you want to keep. So just be careful as you're getting these down. You want to be a little bit delicate. You don't have to be crazy delicate, but be just a little bit delicate. Be conscious of what you're pulling on and make sure you don't break any plants that you want to keep around. So on all of these, I'm cutting the leaves back to the stem, and I'm cutting them off at the top at a manageable height. So what that means for me is I don't want to pull out a ladder. You could and use a ladder and cut these even higher, but the reality is they grow so fast once it gets warm. I don't find the extra hassle and the treachery of being on a ladder within my group of bananas here to really be worth it. So I'm going to cut them as high as I can without using a ladder, and that's good enough for me. Now you see, I keep this bamboo right behind my Musa Basjoos because it helps provide that greenery when it's wintertime. So that's why we have them so close and why we keep it like we do. I'll come in later this winter and clean this up as well. Make sure all the bamboo shoots are shooting up. I don't want them coming out. I don't want them in the bananas. So I'll trim this back a little bit and straighten some things out and get that all cleaned up later. Now, one thing you want to do as you're cutting these, you want to try and reduce any sharp edges. When we cover these things, sharp edges are an opportunity to tear the covering that we're using. So as you are cutting, make sure you're reducing sharp edges, reducing points, and trying to make everything smooth rather than sharp and pointy. The wintertime is a good time of the year to really consider what do you want things to look like next year. And so you'll have a lot of plants that have grown in over the last year. Take a look at where those plants are, which ones you want to keep, which ones you might want to get rid of. I kept a lot last year. I kept, I think, 11 plants that started in the spring. And that was too many for me, I decided. In the space that I have, it's about 10 feet wide, about 3 feet deep. 10 plants grew too many, and so I'm going to look to keep 6 or 7 this year. And I'm just going through and for now I'm just cutting them down to half. The ones I do not want to keep, I'm going to cut them down to half just so they're kind of out of the way. I don't plan on digging them up today, but I'll come back at some point in the winter or very early spring, and I'll dig these out so they don't grow back the same. Now, because I've got just a narrow spot here and I really don't want to fall into the pool, I'm going to go ahead and start cleaning up some of these leaves. These leaves, I'm just throwing them on the base of the plants to help provide some insulation for the roots. When you get really big banana plants in the summer, you got a lot of material to help you insulate those roots. And so I'm going to throw some of this on now. If you have the space to work, I would suggest just holding off on this skip to the next part, which is going to be starting to do the wrapping. And then you're going to use these leaves at the end of the wrapping to insulate the bottom. But for now, I'm just going to put some on so that I can get them out of the way and not go for a swim today. So at this point, the camera quit working. It showed that it was still recording. It sounded like it was still recording, but actually didn't record any of the wrapping. So what I'm doing is I've gone and unwrapped one of these a few days later, and I'm going through the process again of wrapping it, and we will go from there. So you see, here's a clean cut plant ready for wrapping. All the leaves are removed. There's no sharp edges left. And so I'm going to take my bubble wrap, and this is bubble wrap that's just used for shipping packages. And I buy the stuff that's 2 feet wide. I find for especially the larger banana plants, 2 feet wide, it provides you much better coverage. And I just run the bubble wrap over the top of the plant so that you've got the full length on either side of bubble wrap. So if you had a 6 foot tall stem that you were going to wrap, you'd have roughly 12 feet, 6 feet on one side, 6 feet on the other, one piece just draped over the top. And this is why it's important that you don't have sharp edges on the top, because otherwise they're going to poke holes in this and tear it, and you're going to have problems later on. The bubble wrap, when you put it on, the bubbles need to be on the inside facing the plant. Okay, when you look at bubble wrap, there's going to be a smooth, flat surface. And then on the other side of it, that's where the actual bubbles are. You want the bubbles facing the plant. If you put the bubbles facing outwards, that's going to be less effective in keeping the plants warm. So make sure your bubbles are facing in when you put the wrap on the tree. And then I start wrapping at the top. So I take the top of this and I fold it over and use some duct tape. This is indoor, outdoor duct tape, so it holds up in the weather a little bit better. But I'm just folding the top over, and then I'm wrapping that around with some duct tape. And when I'm wrapping it, I'm not trying to suffocate the plant. I want just a little bit of looseness to it. I want it to stay on, but also I don't want it to be too tight, just because, especially as we get into warmer weather in the spring, this plant is probably going to start growing before I've had a chance to take the bubble wrap off. And I just want it to have a little bit of give there. I've had instances in the past where I've wrapped them really tight, and the plants have grown through the top when it starts to get warmer, and then there's now a hole in the bubble wrap, and then it comes in and freezes after that, and it just causes more problems later on. I've had the best results when I just leave it a little bit loose, but it's got to be tight enough to stay on there. So here's what it looks like when it's wrapped on the top. And once that's done, I'm going to go through and just wrap it every few feet. Most of them get 2 or 3 wraps of tape along the pseudostem there. And again, I'm not trying to strangle it. I'm just trying to make sure that this wrap stays in place through the winter weather. Remember as well, trying as best you can as you're going down, keep the bubbles on the inside. It's going to be a little bit tricky in spots depending on how you fold the wrap and how you tape it up, but do your best to keep the bubbles facing on the inside. If a few of them are facing out, or you've got one little piece that, because of the way you wrapped it, one little piece of it is sticking out, it's not the end of the world, but just do your best, and that's good enough. So now that it's all wrapped, you're going to have a gap down at the bottom between where the wrapping ended and the ground. And this is where I'm going to take some extra leaves and I'm going to put those down and just help cover that gap between the ground and the bottom of the bubble wrap. So depending on how well you do with cutting your bubble wrap, you might have just an inch or 2 there. You might have a little bit of a larger space. That's okay. Just cover it with leaves or mulch, bark, whatever. Use the leaves first that you've cut from the banana plants. That's going to save you some costs and some energy, as you should have those just laying around you at this point. So I'm going to stack that up and make sure there's a good cover from the ground to the start of where the bubble wrap is, and that stays insulated. And that does it. So that covers how I winterize my banana plants here in Zone 8. I realize you might have to do a little bit more if you're in a lower zone. You might use 2 sheets of bubble wrap instead of just one like I used. I find one to be sufficient here in Zone 8, but do what's right for you based on the exact details of your climate. If you've got extra leaves you want to throw on the pile, that works too. You'll notice here I left a few of these tall and unwrapped. One of the things that I like to do with plants and life in general is I like to experiment and see what happens and look at the difference between things. So I've left a couple of these unwrapped and tall, and we'll see in the springtime what the difference is between those that I wrapped and those that I didn't wrap, and make an assessment of, is it still valuable to wrap these things? So I'll show you that in the springtime. We'll take a look and see the difference between wrapped versus unwrapped. That's it for this session on how to winterize your Musa Basjoo banana plants. If you have any questions, go ahead and leave a comment below, and I'll be sure to answer you and do what I can to help you out. And don't forget, if you know somebody that would like to grow tropical looking plants in their cold weather backyard, go ahead and share this with them, show them some of the things that they can do. And don't forget to subscribe for more videos on taking care of tropical looking plants in your cold weather environments. Thanks for tuning in, and we will talk to you later. Bye.